Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our panelists this afternoon, Stefaans Brummer, who is the managing editor of Amabungani, Sam So, managing partner, Amabungani, you go everywhere with that thing. What's in here?
My life.
Richard Popek, who's a Daily Maverick Scorpio. And Adriaan Basson, News 24. Am I sitting there? That side, okay. Left, right. Where are you? So, when the first batch of emails came through, I thought, this is a turning point. Something's going to give. It can't just be business as usual. Things are going to change. And then the next batch, the next Sunday, and we're still functioning. There's this veneer of normality. What I want to know, Adriaan, let's start with you. Have we missed our turning point? These emails, at least for me, represented a turning point far bigger than the arms deal. We knew there was corruption. We knew there were names being bandied about. But finally, we had that tangible evidence. Why did the country not react?
Thank you, Redi. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Look, I do think the country has reacted. I think there's a reason why people are here today. I think there's definitely been amazing support of the media recently. There's been quite a bit of reaction in the private sector. Companies have been exposed through the Gupta leaks, even international ripples, companies like McKinsey, SAP, etc., people being suspended, senior executives. We've also seen at Eskom people being moved out of their positions, chiefly Anosh Singh, the CFO. So I do think it's not entirely fair to say nothing has happened. Of course, there should have been an inquiry, but now, of course, the police chief should have appeared on TV to say, we are immediately putting together a crack squad of the best anti-corruption investigators in this country we have. Of course, the Sahara computers and the Oak Bay computers, companies' computers should have been seized by now, should have been handed to forensic investigators. So I think the breakdown of the criminal justice is exposed completely through this leaks.
Richard, I want you to come in there, and I think what I did mean by the country didn't react is exactly that somehow the information is out there, but for some reason, nothing quite pins directly to the person that we all have in mind, but I haven't mentioned yet.
Look, one of the things that you think about when you first get into journalism is that you're going to find the smoking gun. You're going to take the president down. You're going to be spotlight people, That's not quite how things work out. It's way, way more complicated than that. There's way, way more connections out there that you got to put together before you get the real bad guy. You don't, this is not the end of Empire Strikes Back, where Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader face off. And, well, in that movie, the bad guy actually wins, so I don't know why I use that example. But the point is that that's not how this works.
Okay.
That's not how this works. This is an adult job. It's a process. Many of my younger colleagues, and I should add that sitting up here, this feels like an old-aged home. It's just the 5 people sitting. Well, we're just sitting here talking about leaking. I'd imagine that's what. But when I speak to my younger colleagues, they come out where it's like, yeah, let's get these fuckers, and it's that's not exactly how it works. We are one part of this process. Our job is to go there, do the investigative stuff, and quite frankly, what happens after that, is that really up to us? Getting Sean Abrahams out of bed, is that my job? I'm busy, right? So I really don't stress on outcomes.
Just come in there, Swem, because in the earlier panel, there was a conversation around activism, and that journalists can't just keep business as usual when there is that much rot. That part of what we're doing is activism. But also, something else that is, I think, a feature of South African society is that institutional memory is lost. People are moved, they go to different portfolios, and there's one scandal after another. You just cannot keep up. I've found myself paying attention to every single report about the emails, But in my circles, people know about it, but they've forgotten, did that happen? Did this happen? So the fatigue that's kind of, that's kind of creeping in. Talk to me about your tactic, your strategy. Are you concerned about people just moving on psychologically from these emails and what they mean?
I don't think so, because I think it's part of a process where the pressure is building up. There is a reaction. This is a battle about the narrative, and I think these emails have been decisive in demonstrating that the state capture narrative is real. And obviously this is building into and feeding into the political contestation that is happening up until December. I think one of the issues around nothing has happened in response to evidence that if we had a functioning criminal justice system, there would be 50 people arrested. That is testimony to the level of state capture that there has been beyond the Guptas. The fact that the criminal justice system was captured a long time ago, before the Guptas, independently of the Guptas. But I mean, I think as Ferrell pointed out, this is part of the process of fighting back. Giving people agency and information that's our activism.
Yeah.
And I think that what happened at the SABC in terms of recapturing a key state institution, hopefully some of the hearings at Parliament and so on, what we're doing is going to be part of a process of enabling people who still want a functioning democracy to take the initiative, to take some of the ground back.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk then about the legitimacy of the emails. And I doubt that there's anyone in this room who doesn't believe that the emails are legitimate. But we're not the only people who matter. There are many more who matter, who are calling them fake emails. Now, journalism affords us some protections. You don't have to mention your whistleblower. And the fact that it's an anonymous source or whistleblower does not delegitimize the story. But in this fierce contestation and fake news or fake narratives, that is often used to delegitimize the truth, to say it can't be true because it comes from a fake source. I don't want you to reveal who the whistleblower is, but I do want you to take us through the process that you went through as Scorpio and Amabungani to legitimize these emails. What persuaded you that this was real, and what do you say to those who don't believe that it is? They need to be institutionalized, I think, but anyway.
Yeah. First, perhaps just to take you on saying that, people are actually saying these things are fake. I know of two people who are saying that they are fake. One, Mr. Gupta, and one, Mr. Litama. So I think in general, people have pretty much confirmed, those affected by these emails themselves, that insofar as it's within their knowledge, insofar as they have been discovered, caught out in these things, yes, the facts are there, the facts are correct. So I think there's been corroboration, but we went through a process, and that when this all started, and it was well before anyone started publishing, Branko came to me, and there was a collaborative process that started between Daily Maverick and Amabungane, and we spoke to quite extensively to, and I also need to correct you on this, it's not a single source. Let's call it a consortium of sources. And in the end, it was quite a number of people who needed to be brought to safety, which is another interesting story in itself. But we worked with these sources, with two people, quite extensively, to understand exactly how this data fits together, what the origins were. A forensic affidavit was put together, something that says, well, this is the chain of custody, which is very important, should there be a court process at any stage. So those kind of forensic steps were followed, and I think it gave us full confidence. Quite apart from the fact that these things hang together, that it's impossible to thumbsuck 200,000 plus emails, all sorts of documents beyond that, that in turn corroborated by things that we have discovered bit by bit, fought for little bits of information over the years, published over the years. It all hang together. So in my mind, there was no possibility that these things were fake.
Adriaan, I want to go back to the nothing has happened idea. You've mentioned a couple of organizations that have been implicated, the people who've stepped down, who've had to resign, who've been suspended, and all of that. But I take it back to Luthuli House. And the fact that we've seen with Makosi Khoza that when the ANC wants to be robust and quite vocal about that which it doesn't like, it is able to do so. I don't know, maybe by a show of hands, do you think that the reaction from Luthuli House or various factions of Luthuli House has kind of demonstrated the urgency of the matter? In the same way that when we were reading the papers or online, we went, oh my gosh, here's confirmation of this. I remember a story like this 2 years ago. This is how it fits in. Did you get a sense that there was that kind of reaction from the powers that be? No. You see, so that's where I was going.
I'm not disagreeing.
That's where I was going.
Yeah.
And I've kind of forgotten what Sean Abrams looks like.
It's not pretty.
No,
are they nervous? Is this just a machismo and an act of bravado that we're not going to show how vulnerable and nervous we are? Because are they shitting themselves, basically?
Look, I think a few points. I think you're completely correct about the ANC's reaction. I think they called someone, I don't want to say who I think it was because it may have been someone else, but there was the word disgusting was used in relation to Makosi Khoza speaking out. Disgusting. Nobody from the ANC has called the Gupta leaks disgusting, which they are. Mosebenzi Zwane, to my knowledge, has not been called to Luthuli House to explain himself, because clearly he was appointed on the instructions of Duduzane Zuma, who is part of the Gupta family, effectively. So there's a complete inaction on the part of the ANC. You do see voices coming out now. Gwedi Mantashe said people should be arrested. I don't know who's going to arrest them. I think Zweli Mkhize said something similar. There's calls for an internal commission of inquiry now. We've been talking about a commission of inquiry now for months. Even President Zuma has accepted that there should be a commission of inquiry, but we're just not getting there, Redi. And in the meanwhile, the Guptas are flying out of the country every week with their private jet, going to interesting places like Switzerland and London. People have time to move things offshore. People have time to destroy documents. So yes, obviously in action. However, I think Sean Abrams deserves all the criticism he gets. Although, what I would, however, say is that Sean Abrams can do nothing if there's not a police docket. Sean Abrams needs a docket from the police to prosecute, to make a decision on prosecution. Sean Abrams doesn't have investigative capacity. When the Scorpions was killed by Jacob Zuma's ANC in 2008, 2009, the only body left in this country to fight corruption and to prosecute corruption was the police. They started something called the Hawks. It wasn't really an anti-corruption body. It was really the amalgamation of two existing police units, organized crime and commercial crimes. We lost a massive amount of capacity. A lot of the ex-Scorpions went into private sector, to places like KPMG, for example, which I'm sure we'll get to. But it's up to the Hawks, to General Matakata, to be frank, to institute an investigation, to put together a squad of top policemen. We know there are still a lot of police officials left who are dedicated to, who are in the police. I'm being told, and I think it's safe to disclose it, I'm being told there's people in the police who now have to work behind the scenes when they do investigations. So they're not allowed to declare what they're investigating to their bosses, because it will immediately get to Luthuli House. They try and work behind the scenes. Can you imagine how difficult that must be?
Yeah.
There's someone who told me recently that Burning Tlemeza, the former head of the Hawks, who we all know was dishonest and the lackey of President Zuma, when he went to visit Hawks offices around the country, the first thing he would ask his regional heads was, which politicians are you investigating? So that was clearly the tactic to build up his own power in the Hawks with dockets against politicians, and use that as a bargaining chip rather than to prosecute crime. So I think there's much more wrong with the Hawks, or just as much wrong with the Hawks than as with the NPA.
Okay. I guess, and I just remember a dinner conversation where I got incensed when a friend of mine made the observation that the Guptas are clever. And I know what she meant, but that's not the word that I wanted to hear at that moment. But I suppose it speaks to how tactical they were, how precise they were, the military precision. And yes, you did speak about how state capture didn't start with the Guptas. We can go back to history and talk about that. And somebody made the observation in the last panel that it's not the Guptas who are responsible for state capture, but it's the ANC itself. So you need an enabler for this to happen. But when I read the emails and the linking of a certain unemployed former minister said, connect the dots, right? We both fired, and he talked about how we should connect the dots in order for the picture to be complete so that we understand what is happening in our country. I think in spite of myself, I have to concede that they've been quite clever in the way they've managed to own everybody, or is that giving them too much credit?
No, let's give our friends all the credit in the world. They are very good gangsters. Effectively what you do, I want to jump back to your question, first of all, about the fakeness of the emails. I don't really want to touch on that, but I do want to mention, because I think it's pertinent to your question, what it feels like when you're looking at these emails. What it feels like when you're looking at 362,000 emails, plus all the attachments. You're talking about an organization that has thousands of balls in the air at any given time, right? You're talking about lieutenants here, consigliaries here, all of them working in consort to effectively siphon money out of basically state-owned institutions. So the job is really simple. You toll the bridge. That's what the Guptas are. They're bridge trolls, right? They're bridge tolls. So all the money coming through, state tenders going back and forth, they take a percentage of. Not all the money, but a lot of it. That takes a vast network. That takes getting cabinet ministers, that takes getting the boards of state-owned institutions, and it takes a whole hell of a lot of work. They're also schmudder businessmen. So they're in this, they've got a fleet of cars they're running, they've got aircraft, they've got this, they've got this. The breadth of the organization is staggering. And I think it comes down to two real things. An understanding of how weak state institutions are. They had an innate understanding. They come from a political scenario, Uttar Pradesh, that is very, very corrupt. And I think when they came to South Africa, they had an innate understanding of how weak the state institutions were going to be once democracy, in inverted commas, was built up. And they were able to insinuate themselves very, very easily into those mechanisms. And they've done that very, very well. The other thing, and I want this is for the kids at home, they work very hard. They work all the time. When we're on Christmas holidays, doping by the braai, the Guptas are buying aircraft with Canadian money, right? They're working angles all the time that, frankly, most people just wouldn't catch. So if we're here to give them a little bit of credit, you can put your hands together and say, yeah, they do their job pretty well.
You talked about the weakening of institutions. Sam, let me get to that then and build on that. That from what Richard has just described, then you really get to appreciate that it's not one individual who has enabled them. Of course, we look to him because he's the president of the Republic. But as somebody who's on the outside, I'm just fascinated by how they were able to get into the cells of an organization with such an illustrious history, a rich history, and so on. It is jarring for me, and I mean, I listened to Jackson Mthembu talking about the media did this, a lot of inaccurate facts as well, because the media was not a homogenous group during apartheid. There were many who were arrested, tortured and killed, and so on. But I don't think the ANC really appreciates how painful this breakup is for so many of us. I don't think they pause and think that when you write a column or when you speak on the radio, whatever it is that you do about this matter, perhaps they think it comes from a place of enjoyment, that there's a big scandal and we're talking about it. But when you know the ANC's history and what it was meant to be in democracy, this is very, very painful. And so you look at it and you see not just Zuma, but you see the ANC. You see the ANC in Parliament around Nkandla and how they handled it. Thuli Madonsela and how the sexism, the insults and all of that. And you think, how did an organization become so susceptible and vulnerable to this kind of manipulation?
Look, just to go back to the Guptas, when we started to look at them and to look at the emails and to look at some of their connections and so on, we looked at how things happen in India, Uttar Pradesh, for example, and the kind of intersection of business, crime, and politics that we see with the Guptas and the ANC here is standard operating procedure there. And I think I wrote about this before. Shabir Sheikh, he came in as a kind of tenderpreneur. He just wanted a slice of the cake. They came in and they saw, well, we can have the whole cake. Nobody's thought about that here. The way we do it back home, So, to some extent, I think it was like taking candy from a baby. Although, they were very strategic. I don't think that we should underestimate the position and the power of the president. None of this would have happened without the president. That's, the absolute culpability there, there should be no doubt about, although he's been very good at keeping his fingerprints off things. I did an interview with an ex-apartheid security guy some years ago, and he was saying that during the transition period, so after 1990 but before 1994, basically every weekend they would break into the ANC office in Durban and go through all the documents and so on, and photograph them and see what they were doing. And Alec Irwin's desk was covered with everything and so on. Zuma had nothing. They got nothing from Zuma. He never writes anything down, etc.
Can he write anything down?
But that kind of intelligence training and that intelligence attitude and only doing things face to face, etc., makes taking the step from his son, from the Guptas and so on, to the president difficult. But I think the reason why the ANC is kind of frozen, like deer in the headlights, is because they knew about all of this. They knew everything has been happening, but they can't take the step because it means confronting the president. It means confronting the organization they've become, and it means fracture essentially. And so they're desperate to avoid that.
Stefaans, I still want to go back to the impact on society. In the previous panel, I think it was chaired by my former colleague Xolani Gwala, Mark Haywood was on that panel. He said that the media is not doing a good enough job of demonstrating to society that these are the consequences of state capture. When there aren't enough houses being built, when school nutrition is not being delivered, whatever it is that's supposed to make a difference in the lives of people is not happening to the extent that it could. You've given South Africans the information at great risks, and I'm sure personal costs to yourself. We'll talk about it. You've done the investigation. You've verified all of this. What's the next step? Where do you envisage this journey going?
I think for us it is simple. We continue doing what we do. And I think I disagree to an extent with some of the kind of easy talk that we had from that panel about activism and journalism. Perhaps I'm old school, but I do believe there is a very firm line. Our job is for the public to know. Mm-hmm. We put information out there. And yes, we don't always do it perfectly. And especially us investigative people, often we're so buried in the figures and the spreadsheets and the pieces of paper and what have you, that we don't devote the necessary time to telling a story that everyone can understand. But there are others then who need to take up that baton. Okay. And I think that is the correct way for it to happen, because as soon as we become too activist, then of course we undermine ourselves. Then we give grist to the BLF mill. Mm-hmm.
Adriaan, let's talk about, because I think it is relevant, the fake news, although another panelist said she doesn't prefer that term. Let's just use it just to keep things simple. We see the difference between the emails and fake news. I think identifying fake news has become easier with the real news, the real evidence, the forensic evidence and all of that. But what has been the impact, do you think, of fake news and its purveyors, the lieutenants, all of them who come and shout and scream and all of that? Are they having an effect? In other words, is there a chance of the truth just disappearing somewhere because of that amplified and loud voice of the one or two people, as Stefan said?
Look, Redi, I think it's pretty clear to me at least that the whole WMC project was in reaction to state capture. So the moment when the concept of state capture became popular, people like Advocate Thuli Madonsela used it during her investigation. Us in the media started using it. This concept of white monopoly capital became the fight back campaign of people like the Gupta family, people like BLF. And I mean, I was actually having a discussion with colleagues earlier this week where I said part of the perversion of that, of course, is that something like monopoly capital in this country, mostly white monopoly capital, is real. And that debate has now been taken away and completely perverted by the Guptas and Bell Pottinger. So that's also one of the victims, I think, of what has happened here. But that WMC, those websites that have been set up, we're slowly getting to unpack this entire scheme, this fight back scheme, this disinformation campaign, Stratcom campaign, effectively, to take the attention away from the stories we've been producing under the slogan Gupta Leaks, under something called WMC Leaks. Scurrilous things, invasion of privacy, Peter Bruce being followed around for how long to his house, pictures of him in private settings being taken, people like Feral Haffajee being abused on social media for months now, in a horrible, disgusting, sexist way. Those things have impact. That have an impact. We as senior journalists, we've probably got thicker skins than most, other people. But there are junior colleagues in my newsroom who I don't even know what impact this is having on them. Maybe they wanted to become investigative journalists, but the chilling effect of this assault, of this public assault, denigration that's been going on for months, has convinced them to rather stay in fashion or, some kind of safe space.
Hey,
and that's
fashion
really
is not
that's
a safe
no. I'm sure there's.
What do you know about
I'm sure there's hardcore fashion. No disrespect to fashion journalists, not at all. But the point I'm really trying to make is I think the chilling effect of this fight back campaign under the fake slogan WMC has not yet been established, and I think it's damaging. It's perverting a real discussion about economic transformation we should be having as a country, and it's clearly been designed by software engineers in India, by Twitter engineers in Tel Aviv, by public relations companies in London to distract attention from state capture.
And Richard, just to come in there, I mean, I know that people are fascinated by these stories of crime and all of that. I mean, the great train robbery that became part of, that became a movie. And then I think Ranjani wrote about this when the emails first came out a couple of weeks ago, and gave some examples about people's fascination with crime, whether it's the Wall Street, what's that, Wolf guys? Wolf of Wall Street, and we had that heist in South Africa in 1996 that also became a movie. But the importance of what Adriaan is talking about, demonstrating that this is not entertainment, this is something that has had and is having a real impact in people's lives. I mean, do we know how much money we've lost? Do the emails tell us in real terms what the tangible loss, rands and cents?
I'm not sure, and I'd hand that question over to Stefaans. I think in terms of have we mapped every rand and cent? No, not at this stage, and I'm not sure if that's ever going to happen. But I do want to say something. This is not Harry Potter, right? This is the real world, and the real world is very, very complicated. And the system that, let's fly up a little bit and look at this from above. And let's disassociate ourselves even from the fact that we're South Africans and feel very deeply about this country and are connected to this country and want it to work. What the leaks reveal is how the system functions. The Guptas are a mechanism in that system, but what we have not yet talked about in this panel is how white monopoly capital plugs very neatly into this system. Now, we have implicated McKinsey, KPMG, the guys who are supposed to audit right? The actual gatekeepers who are supposed to who are supposed to provide regulation, an essential mechanism in how this, in how capital actually functions. They step back and don't do their jobs, right? So what we're seeing basically is how the whole system starts to melt down in a context like this one. And if we go even a little bit higher, I would argue that the Gupta leaks, less than a true crime narrative, are very similar to the Pentagon Papers, right? Which was another massive leak, another tranche of leaked papers that showed how money flowed all over the world. And so when you try to transfer $10 to a friend in New York from South Africa, you've got the hawk show up at your door, right? For someone to move 10 million to a Standard Charter account every 2 or 3 weeks, that's no problem. So in other words, the world functions very different for the 0.1%. The story we wrote last night relates to how the just try to get your heads around this, how the Export Development Bank of Canada loaned the Guptas, and they knew it was the Guptas through West Dawn Investments, $41 million US dollars to buy a private jet. Okay? Canadian taxpayers, okay, hard-working Canadian taxpayers, essentially gave $41 million to the Guptas at very preferable rates to buy a private jet. That's what the leaks reveal. So the system functions very differently, the system that we're living in right now, and it's melting down around us. Don't let anybody tell you that growth is going to save you. Don't let anybody tell you that just if we get this right and we stop the corruption, it's all going to work. It's not. The system is so rotten down to the core that we really need to think about new ways of running it, because what these leaks reveal is exactly that, how bad things are.
I mean, Sam, just again, I'm sitting here thinking how much of this can be reversed, not just in terms of the money, but just the moral high ground, just repairing a broken society. I mean, there are people who speak so nonchalantly or glibly about war and that let things break down, we'll rebuild them. I mean, if you think how long it takes to rebuild a society, I mean, we can't even fathom that. But based on what you know, the damage is extensive. We can hear that. But can we recover? How much of these transactions can be reversed?
Look, I'm a bit more of an optimist than Richard, and
That's not hard.
He hasn't even smiled. He hasn't smiled once.
If you get out of bed in the morning, you're more of an optimist than me.
look, I mean, essentially, I see this as a dialectic. You never win this battle because it's essentially in the nature of power. And I think where I agree with him around the global phenomenon is the globalization has resulted in greater and greater concentrations of power. So the means to create human institutions that can push back against that power and enforce accountability, enforce some kind of redistribution, without which proper society is impossible. That's become more and more difficult. But the media is a key institution in that process. And I think, in this country, we are lucky that we've survived as an institution that does what it's supposed to do. Perhaps better than the great American media institution. They're kind of relearning it. And I do think that, if enough people wake up to the problem, then we can do something about it. As I say, there was a confluence of factors and interests that allowed us to recapture the SABC. And that victory is going to be incredibly important for what happens in December, for what happens going forward. And I think there are other institutions within the society where that's also possible. I think the fact that we've shown up the audit firms and just shown how complicit and how weak they have been. That's been important. Maybe one or two auditors will flag a few things that they wouldn't have done before, etc. But we have to rebuild the institutions. I'm not sure where to start and where the best things. The police, the NPA, I think are crucial. Parliament Parliament is crucial, the fact that Parliament is starting to regain its voice. But I think it's, it's everywhere that we have to push back.
And Stefaans, I mean, I'm not sure that the public not trusting politicians is a bad thing. But equally, I'll add business as well, because you find others who say, give everything to the private sector, let them run things. It's all part of the same, it's the same continuum. And what it tells me is that it's just power. Power is greedy, whether it's political, economic, they all just go together. What do you think society, I think, should learn in terms of its relationship with decision makers? I just feel that we're at that point that we can't defer our tomorrow to those decision makers who have proven themselves to be corrupt, to be greedy, and there were others before them. And I know that the ANC loves very much to remind us that there was corruption before they came into power, as though there's meant to be a competition between who's more corrupt than, no, but there's been that kind of like rubbish response to the emails that it's nothing compared to the looting under apartheid, blah, blah, blah. We can't do anything about it. It's all part of the same thing, right? So, yeah, that's exactly what I'm asking, that has this redefined in post-apartheid South Africa? Because the ANC enjoyed a lot of trust amongst people. If you go to the township where I came from, the ANC was seen as a savior for a very, very long time. But that honeymoon is coming to an end, and I don't think that's a bad thing, is it?
Yeah, I think
not just in relation to the ANC, but to political, to power in general. Yeah.
Yeah. I think to an extent it might reflect a personal journey that I had when I started at the Mail and Guardian at the cusp of our democracy, and it was interesting how the Mail and Guardian had come from a history of one of these newspapers, one of the media institutions that did not have to apologize, as Mr. Mthembu demands. The Mail and Guardian had been there with the ANC fighting against apartheid. But then, there we are, starry-eyed after the first democratic elections, and we start noticing things that aren't quite as they should be, that our heroes do have clay feet after all. And it was painful. And I think that the best advice that I can give to citizens, to the people of South Africa, would be, be a healthy anarchist. My red cap might have flown all the way down to my socks now, but I think keep a healthy distance from all authority at all times.
Yes.
Question, as investigative journalists do.
Indeed.
And it's only when you question that you will connect the dots, that you will know the truth. We do our best to inform, but that duty is incumbent on any person to understand the nature of power.
You've just reminded me of the arms deal saga. It's Andrew Feinstein who writes after the party. And there was one line that I read over and over again because I could just imagine Esop Pahad swearing at him and wagging his finger at him and saying, who the F do you think you are, questioning a democratic government and all of that. And that's exactly what we should be doing. Henry van Vuren writes in his book about apartheid, guns and money, how as a little boy they used to rehearse and have these parades in preparation for P.W. Botha coming to the sports field to come and see the public, and they were rehearsing, waving, preparing for his visit. And when he came, he spent just a split second there. And it dawned on him when he reflects now that, he had not come there to see us. He had come there so that we can see him for that split second. He's just forgotten about us. We were erased. We were not there. He didn't care about us. And I think that is the message that I would take from this, that we've got to see this as an opportunity to reclaim our country, whichever way we choose to do it, because information is power. We make the right decision. We ignite the right kind of activism when we know the truth. But before we take questions from the audience, I do want you to take us to those private moments where you, as investigative journalists, have to deal with the aftermath of revelations. Because I think a lot of people don't appreciate the bullying that goes on behind the scenes. They don't appreciate the funny break-ins at people's homes. I don't know if any of you have had that, but or bugging of telephones. I mean, this is not fiction. It does happen. The marginalizing, ostracizing people, the bullying on social media, because Ferial wrote about the impact of those doctored fake news and those images, very misogynist and sexist and all of that. And I must say, Ferial, even as I was reading the stuff, I thought, rubbish, I don't have time for this. But until you wrote your column, I didn't realize how painful it had been, because my assumption was that, come on girl, you were there during apartheid, you're tough, you can handle it, Ranjani, all those images of you superimposed on Rupert's thighs, all of that. It was ugly, but I dismissed it until you said it was very painful. So I'm wondering, here you are, you've brought us this information. Has it been at a cost, personally, or there's an inspiration and strength that you gain from the response amongst people like this?
My mother is praying for me every day. She sent me a SMS recently, which she got from a friend, that there's this prayer group all over the country with all our names in it, which is amazing. I mean, I love the fact that South African citizens are standing up, and I really want to kind of joy in Sam's optimism to say that I think there's a fight back. I think we're in the middle of the fight back. I think we shouldn't lose hope. People are standing up, people like the Honorable Mcebisi Jonas. And people like, sorry to point you out, sir, but Minister Jonas here is much braver, had much more to lose than I had. And he stood up, he said no to a 600 million rand bribe, I mean, that inspires me every day to go to work in a difficult environment where the media economy is broken, where we're fighting to make money in digital media, where we fight to have for the appointment of every journalist, we're trying to rebuild journalism, where we're fighting against very well-funded disinformation campaigns driven from the UK. But people like that, how can we in the media not then play our part?
Yeah.
So, yes, it is sometimes scary. The BLF case comes to mind recently, where there were threats, real threats, against Peter Bruce, went to his home, intimidated him. I've got a small child who's at home during the day.
And remember at Mwiponi and Solima Paila's home, they were protesting at the time that her nanny had just arrived from picking up a 3-year-old child. So those kind of.
And of course, it would have been easier, I guess, in another life, not to have to do these things. But speaking for myself, I have no choice. It's part of me. I want to be part of this. I would feel that I'm not doing my duty. So luckily, we have the support. We can still write what we like. Nobody's been imprisoned for writing these stories. We have the space to collaborate in this wonderful campaign or this project we've been at. So there is hope, but it is not always nice. It's you have to have a thick skin.
So Richard, they say don't judge a book by its cover, but you look like you really don't give a shit.
I'm a white male. I don't spend a lot of time crying for myself, and it certainly isn't appreciated. Does this stuff take its toll? It does. But for me, it takes a toll in a very specific way and an intellectual way. What do we do next? I mean no disrespect when I say we stood up and applauded someone for not taking a bribe. That is a society that is sick.
I stood up because you all stood up.
And I mean no disrespect to the former deputy minister, but that's where we're at. So that stresses me right the hell out, to be quite frank. And this constant question of pushing up against the work that we do, which is process-driven and it's procedural-driven. Bad guy, go catch him, right? Bad guy, go catch him, okay? Or not so bad guy, don't catch him. So all of that stuff, those narratives that we build are wonderful, and the job brings an enormous amount of pleasure. and an enormous amount of reward, and we shouldn't get away from that. And that there's a side effect to that, sure, okay, whatever. But what truly sort of vexes me is what next? What society are we going to build on the back of the information that we process? So there's a sort of dual track that runs in your brain. Left brain is doing the process-driven work. Right brain is, what world are my kids going to live in? What country are my kids going to live in?
Yeah.
All right?
Stan, for you?
Yeah, I think maybe Stefaans and I have been doing this longer than anyone else. And in a way, like Adriaan, it's an addiction. I wouldn't be doing anything else. But it does have its toll on our families, on ourselves. I see partly, we're all white men here, but it's partly my payback for my privileged upbringing. I'm using my skills, to do something for the society, and I think that does have its cost in terms of, the obsession that we have in doing this work. I don't perhaps devote enough attention to my family and to other things, and certainly not to running running the rest of my life. But I do think that idea of service, we're not going to build a caring society if people don't care enough to actually make sacrifice. I think we all have to do that.
Stefan?
I don't think there's terribly much to add to that, and I also believe quite firmly that we should not be the story. And what you have seen in recent times has been an attempt by some people out there to turn us into the story, to kick up a lot of dust, to make that the story. And I mean, I really prefer for us to keep our heads down, to focus on what we have to do to inform the public.
And I would like to say, I think it's a lot tougher being a woman doing this job.
It's a lot tougher being?
A lot tougher being a woman doing this job.
I can tell you that for free.
I think the dangers are much more manifest, right? I think it can be much more perilous. And for us, there's always whiskey, right? So,
if I can make a point about that, Redi. I mean, what's one thing is nice about the leaks is we didn't start working on the Guptas now with the leaks. We've been working for a long time. And they have confirmed a lot of what we got through older traditional methods and so on. And some of that traditional methods involved whistleblowers, particularly from government, from state-owned companies. And I was saying to Stefaans the other night, it is black women who have taken the risk from those institutions to say enough is enough. We've got to go and we've got to take the risk to talk to the media.
So my final comments, we are going to take questions from the floor. I was eavesdropping on a conversation at the back, and somebody was making the observation that we are all talking amongst ourselves, and the masses and ordinary South Africans are excluded. I regard us as ordinary South Africans, but I think I understand what context they meant. I must say, I do want to say or caution against dismissing ordinary people and assuming that they're not part of these conversations. I think they're part of these conversations in different networks, and I'll tell you what I mean. The Friday after Legitimacy and Pravin Gordhan were fired, because they were fired on a Thursday, if I'm not mistaken, late on Thursday. I mean, it felt like the country was experiencing a hangover. I remember that morning. I was just feeling sick to my stomach. I left my house, going to the shopping center to do nothing, just to get out of it all. People were depressed, and they were walking with shoulders slumped, right? And as I was leaving my house, the gardeners in my street, I didn't even know they knew my name, but they were gathering at the corner, and one of them stopped me and said, "Hey, Redi, what's going on here?" And I said, "Hey, I don't know. He said, we must fix this mess. We must fix this mess." And then he asks me, "Do you know where Cyril Ramaphosa lives? He doesn't live far from us." He said, "I'm going to take you to him." And you must tell him that they need to stop this nonsense, they need to fix this. And then he went on and on and on about the events of the last couple of hours. And then just very recently, I went to fetch my 3-year-old from school. And again, the parking attendants, they stopped me. I didn't even know they knew my name. Says, hey, I'm looking for Nomvula. Do you know Nomvula Mukanya? I said, wait, what are you looking for Nomvula Mukanya for? Says, the rent has fallen. I want to help her pick it up. And then the last bit, the last story, President Zuma made a speech. I can't even remember. I can't really listen much these days. But after an ANC gathering where he was talking about two deputy presidents for the ANC, that the losing faction must not lose, we must bring them in and so on.
Everyone gets a prize.
Yeah, so everyone gets a prize, yeah. So again, the gardener at my child's school says, hey, you must find Zuma and tell him that 1 + 1 is 2, not 3. So I'm just saying that there are different ways of engaging with events in your country, and we mustn't dismiss people and say they're not here. They are, right? So we've got about 11 minutes for questions from the audience. I think that you were the recipients of the emails. You are reading about them. You're analyzing them. What are your questions?
Thank you, Redi. Just 1 or 2 comments. Sam, I come from KwaZulu-Natal. And the fact that I was prepared to pay 1,800 Rand, fly to Cape Town and come here is an indication, I think, of a concern that we as South Africans feel. And Sam Soul has got quite deep footprints and good institutional memory in KwaZulu-Natal. And to affirm the concern of people, I was quite surprised to get a message on a WhatsApp group, please pray for Sam Soul and his family because he's got small children and they're very worried. And I really was a bit gobsmacked. But in fact, the footprints of what's happening now, if you read Bill Johnson's book, Will South Africa Survive, the first edition, he chronicles carefully what Zuma was up to in the KwaZulu province. I think Trevor Manuel, in an open letter to Jimmy Money, demolished this whole structure. And the last comment I want to make, which surprised me a little, is that nobody mentioned in terms of pushback the work that the Helen Suzman Foundation is doing. Because they certainly are putting huge pressure on, well, particularly the Hawks and various other bodies. But keep it up, Sam. Natal's rooting for you, man.
Go shots.
You've been rooted
Oh,
for.
shot.
Hi, I'd just like to ask the panel, I know over here, I know you've all from Amabongane and News 24 and also Daily Maverick collaborated to bring the Gupta leaks to the public and get it out online. I'd like to know, has this work spurred people to be bolder? Have you found that as you've published the material, people have come forward, maybe Redi, even you as well, with what you've covered on radio? Has this made people who are inside the institutions of government or even Oak Bay more courageous to speak out and kind of get the ball rolling?
Hi, should I go? Hi, my name is Shirley. I know that you do this amazing work as a journalist, as an investigative journalist, but you're also South African. This is your money also. You pay taxes in this country. Don't you ever feel really angry? I mean, don't you cry sometimes in your silence as a South African, not as a journalist? If you were to find yourself in a room with Zuma, what would you ask him?
I'd ask them to pass the sugar. I'll answer that last one, if you don't mind, gents. Again, just last night, because I was working. I'll tell you what really makes me want to punch a wall, and that is the tax haven structure. Again, that is a global structure. It's not localized to South Africa. And again, guys, the key to these leaks is the fact that this is a global story, that this links up with other systems all over the world. The global tax haven situation that allows the super rich to hide their money and to disappear their taxes in a way that we would never, ever be able to do. That is the most disgusting part about being alive right now, as far as I'm concerned. And there are many disgusting parts, because the rich do not pay taxes, right? So that to me is the part that is just so upsetting. And what that does is it guts out the wealth of societies, and we've spoken about it quite a bit today, this offshoring of South African wealth, which means that all the stuff we would like to do, we can't do. And all of that is basically legal.
Okay.
If I can, in part at least, answer the first question, I think that yes, absolutely. Amabungane has a tip-off email line, our phone numbers, etc., are there, and it's actually been quite amazing how this has galvanized people to speak not only about things that they know about the Gupta leaks, and that has included people from within the structures, people from within government, yes, but also to speak about all sorts of other things that are wrong in the society. And this is where my sense of anger comes in, because you can see that people are groaning under a broken system. They have no recourse, and they see where we are able to make a very, very small dent in a very big problem, then we become the saviors, which sadly we cannot be. We cannot be that for everyone.
Yes.
But again, so that sense of a system that is just very, very badly broken. But hopefully by us being able to make an example, at least in some key instances, such as this, such as how the Guptas and others have perverted the state, the ruling party, etc. Hopefully we can at least raise that hurdle to some extent.
Can I answer the question about the president from Soli? What would you ask
I'll,
him? Or-
I'll,
you
I'll
want to go?
respond to the question about the president. I mean, the one thing about being an investigative journalist in a way, I mean, I think, well, speaking for myself, we're mostly middle class people, and in a sense, you have to pursue your own loss of innocence, particularly in relation to the way power works. Once you get up beyond a certain point in the ladder, and this is not only in this country, it's across the world. The kind of the way in which people think just changes. The level of instrumentality. So nothing essentially is a moral question anymore. That's why for Zuma those sort of questions wouldn't make any sense. It's essentially just a problem, and what does it cost to make it go away? The way in which those people approach the world is very, very different. And I think part of the problem that Richard is talking about is the whole system by which we arrange our societies, by which we reward and recognize people, in a sense, is a positive feedback loop for that system, which essentially makes the rest, disempowers the rest of us, and pushes power up to a system that really doesn't care about what happens down below.
If I can briefly respond to the first speaker, I think the civil society has stepped up in a massive way. Not only the Helen Suzman Foundation, Freedom Under Law, Judge Kriegler, OUTA, Equal Education in Section 27 for years has been addressing these issues in education. TAC, Zaki and Mark started this. So there's this wonderful, and I applaud those guys. They do amazing work. They go to court, they pick their battles. Helen Suzman has picked the hawks. Freedom Under Law has been litigating against the NPA bosses for years. And this helps us a lot to unearth that information. I think when Menzi Simelane was taken to court by the DA, of course, also has to be applauded. Opposition parties, the EFF, the UDM, go to court. When they went to court against Menzi Simelane not being fit and proper, it was a strange case.
Yes.
It was the first time someone went to court and wasn't sure about locus standi, and that really set the ball rolling for lots of these applications.
Yeah. And just to add on that, I mean, remember at Kathrada's memorial, Praveen Gordon, who'd just been fired that week, said mobilize, mobilize. And a lot of South Africans said, but I don't want to join a political party. You don't have to. I don't want to be a politician. There's so many things we can do to mobilize. And all these organizations that we've cited need your money to do their work. So that's another area of mobilizing, isn't it? So there's a lot of work that is going on. We've got 3 minutes, so I think we'll allow two more questions. Okay, is there a microphone somewhere? Quickly, yep.
Thank you very much to the five of you. We're very grateful to you in your various ways of doing things. Two things. The first one, just to Redi, you made an aside suggesting our president might have a problem writing. Our president's a highly intelligent man.
I know.
He's surrounded by highly intelligent people. They have access to the foreshore, to Stellenbosch, Tygerberg, Sandton. We are fixers. We have the best financial market, among the best financial market services in the world. That's why it's all been possible. And I think it was Richard who was pointing to that. So that's the first point. The second is how far back we want to take the story of state capture. I think Sam Mokotedi this morning said it began much earlier. Perhaps it began when we, the people, voted in Lusaka Central to look after our future. But it's much, much deeper. It's in the bureaucracy, it's in the unions, it's rampant. And if the Gupta leaks can actually serve as the turning point, that will really be fantastic. Thank you.
No, I agree with you. That was said in jest. I think President Zuma is a very smart man. I really think he is, but he's not smart in other areas. But in this area, he's been extremely smart. That's why we're here, right?
He's been smarter as, I mean, the Shabir Sheikh trial, which Sam and I covered, I mean, they were like direct deposits into his account, you know, like this time it's not that.
It's not that, yeah.
There's a son, you know, they're called Duduzane.
Yeah, he's gotten smarter.
I think that point is often missed, that Jacob Zuma, in this instance, he has been hiding in plain sight. His son is there. His son is the bagman. And we'll be writing more about that soon. There's some interesting flow.
50 seconds. Anything you want to say? Quick. How much more will still come out? He wants to know. You're so impatient.
Lots is still to come out. Stay tuned.
Wilt geduldig.
Can you do one more?
30 seconds.
Feki Mentor mentioned in her book that the first time she met Jacob Zuma, he asked if she could find any diamonds for him. Does anyone know, has that been a story that anyone's pursued at all?
I'm sure
I just wondered if he was in diamond dealing from way back when in the early 90s.
No idea.
I don't know. I think some books about the ANC, the Lusaka years, I think, is one of those books that make all sorts of allegations about the criminality in the ANC and that it was a parallel state.
It was when they came back to South Africa.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so very much. Time is up. And let me thank my panel, Adriaan, Richard, Sam, Stefaans. Thank you.